Hello! Welcome to the Jiam Analysis video. I have a lot to say about these two. I touched on their friendship in a past video, if you haven't seen that, but I have a lot more to say, so I figured I'd talk about it in a separate video too. Because even though their friendship gets a reputation for not being very substantial compared to Jake's friendships with people like Drew, I think there's some interesting stuff here that would be fun to talk about. Honestly, my main goal in this video isn't even to prove that Jake and Liam have a super complicated friendship or anything. It's just to prove one thing. That absolutely no one should be buying into Liam's stupid I don't give a crap act, because it's not true. He's tricking you, okay? I mean, in all seriousness, people can headcanon whatever they want, but I personally believe that Liam cares about Jake a lot. It's just that his method of showing that can be subtle in comparison to Jake's other friendships. And in order to prove that, we're going to recap and analyze their entire friendship in chronological order. Which means that first, we're going to start our dissection with... For those unaware, Rosie Closey has, in addition to the first season of TMF, posted a comic book episode, which depicts the very early friendship of the Jomies. So while Liam and Jake's first meeting is seen in episode 9, the comic book episode is some other canon material we can look at to see what happens directly after that. Which means we're gonna have to look at Liam's stupid freshman year haircut for a while, sorry. But I'm getting a little ahead of myself. Let's just focus on episode 9 for now. This is the episode where we see Jake and Liam meet for the first time. And while you'd expect for there not to be much to talk about, since they don't really know each other yet, I actually think there's something worth noting here. After Drew fails to introduce Liam and Henry, Liam does it himself, and the usual Henryum shenanigans ensue. Liam being the one to introduce the two of them and act friendly doesn't seem unusual on the surface, but I do think it's kind of funny how Henry takes his time sizing Jake up and deciding if he likes him, whereas Liam seems to like Jake immediately just based on the grounds that he's friends with Drew and looks harmless enough. Instead of bonding over shared interests with him like Henry and Drew do, Liam seems perfectly content liking Jake right off the bat, unconditionally, which I know sounds like normal, polite friend behavior on its own, but when you compare it to all the other Liam behavior we'll see later, I think it paints a very interesting picture. So let's put a pin in that for now. Transitioning to the comic episode, the only scenes that Jake and Liam are together in are the bullying scenes. There isn't too much to say about the dialogue, just that Liam contributes to the peer pressure Jake is feeling to insult Haley. But there's one visual detail concerning Liam that does stand out, that being how he puts his hand on Jake's shoulder, which is definitely Drew's thing, even on thumbnails, and even in this comic book episode. But in the critical moment where Jake needs to make a decision, Liam is the only one we can see in frame, both figuratively and literally putting pressure on Jake, which I find to be a very interesting visual choice. It could mean nothing, but, well, that's no fun, and the whole point of this video is to overanalyze every detail about these two's interactions, so I'm just going to assume this visual choice does have some intention behind it. And in my mind, there are two possibilities for what that intention was. The most likely one is that the artist wants to show that Liam is already very comfortable around Jake, and so Liam will do stuff like putting his hand on Jake's shoulder in order to convey that closeness. The second possibility is that this was to show how Liam really is the one putting the most mental pressure on Jake. But in that case, you'd think that since Drew's expectations are what Jake cares most about in the present show, Drew would be the one to put his hand on Jake's shoulder at the height of the peer pressuring, not Liam. The only explanation I can think of to solve this problem would be that Jake was actually the most intimidated by Liam early on, which is a really weird but very interesting theory. It would kind of fit in with the vampire shtick Liam has going on, and generally I would say Liam is the dromie who comes off the most disingenuous, especially in earlier episodes. I can imagine a scenario where, during freshman year, Jake trusts Drew the most because he met him first, and he thinks Henry seems harmless, but he can't really figure out Liam's deal, and that unknown scares him until he inevitably realizes that Liam is just as lame as Henry and definitely won't do anything to him unless Drew starts it. And that all sets the stage for the present, where Drew is the one whose opinion Jake worries about the most. All that's speculation, though. We'll probably never know why Liam was the one who got more focus over Drew in that moment. It really could be as simple as Drew usually being the instigator and Henry and Liam doing more to escalate. So I should probably just stop rambling about this and move on to the actual show. Psych. Nah, but seriously, I don't think there's much to talk about here. These episodes do take place between the comic episode and episode 1, but Liam and Jake never interact in them, so we don't get any new information. Moving on. We can do a few speed rounds through these next few episodes since there isn't too much to talk about. Early Jiam is pretty simple to understand, all things considered, though from here on out I'll probably mostly be talking about Liam's perspective just because we see everything from Jake's perspective already, so I don't really need to over-explain his thought process. He usually just tells us why he's doing or saying things himself. Now, let's get started. In episode 1, Liam says that Stacy's mom has got it going on, then says Jake should hurry up and ask out Daisy before he asks her first. And clearly these two have enough trust established for Jake to know he's joking. Then, later, when Jake makes up a dumb excuse for why he can't hang out, all three of Drew, Henry, and Liam look confused because Jake is a very, very terrible liar. However, Liam believes that Jake would never ditch them without good reason. So, like any good friend, he assumes Jake must just have a thing for teachers. Obviously. Whether he's joking or not is up for debate, but either way, he doesn't seem to think Jake is actually doing anything he should be concerned over. So next, episode 2. Jake and Liam only get a chance to speak to each other in the opening scene, where Jake admits that he's going to join the music club. Liam seems surprised that Jake is willing to do months of work just to impress a girl who might end up rejecting him anyway, but he's also impressed. He seems much less upset about this new arrangement than Drew, and he completely buys Jake's excuse about only joining the club for Daisy. If Jake says that's the case, then he'll believe him. Now for episode 3! Even less happens in this episode! Jake and Liam's only interaction is Liam seeming impressed with just how much damage Millie could do to Jake's face with only one elbow. And that's it. I promise things will get more interesting soon, okay? Except not in episode 4, because Liam only gets one line and it's directed at Henry, so moving on. Yay, something actually happens this episode. A few things, actually, so we can go one episode at a time now. The first thing to happen is that Jake tells Drew not to call the music club freaks anymore, which isn't even a comment directed at Liam, but I think is very interesting nonetheless, because even though Drew is supposedly Jake's best friend, it actually takes him quite a while to take this suggestion to heart, even for a short period of time. Liam, however, actually listens to him. That's right, Liam is the only Jomi to get through this entire show without saying the word freak once. Good job, Liam. The bar is in hell, but you cleared it. After Jake makes this request, Liam makes it a point to never actually refer to the music freaks by their titular name, which is very notable for a main antagonist. The first instance of him doing this is when he actually refers to Sean by name in episode 9, despite Henry calling Sean one of the freaks just a line earlier. But even if you want to argue that that's just a coincidence and a symptom of the writer wanting to make Liam and Henry's lines less alike, Liam avoids saying freak again in episode 11, and even more directly this time when he calls the music club, well, the club. And since no one else calls them the freaks in this scene, it can't be another instance of diversifying lines. There was a distinct choice made to have Liam call them the club instead of the freaks. And I think that's really interesting, since Liam would have absolutely no reason to do this except for wanting to follow Jake's wishes. Even the mean side characters have to correct themselves when referring to the club this episode, so it's extra noticeable that Liam, who should have some of the most beef with the club this episode, has no problem calling them the club. Side note, Maria also just calls them the club, which I think is really funny since it shows how disconnected from the main plot she is. She barely has any idea what's going on, but she's very entertained by all this drama. But anyways, let's get back on track. I point all this out to make the point that Liam seems to be the only one who actually listened to Jake in this moment. If Jake says not to call them freaks, then fine. Liam won't, if that's what he wants. And it falls right in line with everything else Liam does during this conversation. He questions the reasoning of the strategy to ask out Daisy and generally criticizes Jake's questionable romancing abilities, but he doesn't make any major fuss about Jake's plan to stick with the music club. If this is really what Jake wants, then Liam will let him do it. But that doesn't mean he won't point out the plan's logical inaccuracies along the way. Or at least what seems illogical if he believes Jake about all this just being a plan to get with Daisy. Unlike Drew, who seems to take the matter of Jake leaving personally, and even suspects out loud that Jake might just genuinely like the club's company, Liam keeps all talk of Jake's plan to how it relates to Daisy. Because Liam, unlike Drew, has zero reservations about Jake's intentions. If Jake says that this is for Daisy, then it is. Instead of seeing the holes in Jake's plan as suspicious, Liam, like any good friend, instead believes the holes must mean that Jake is simply an idiot who can't ask out Daisy normally and keeps getting in his own way. Which is sort of true, even as it becomes increasingly obvious that that isn't the full truth. Moving on, Jake and Liam's next interaction is when Liam passes Jake the ball during their soccer game. Jake, fully lost in his own mind, messes up the pass. Liam, initially, seems a bit peeved about this, but he quickly forgives Jake once Drew points out that Jake's probably just distracted by a girl again. There's not much to this scene, but it is funny to me that Liam passing the ball to Jake, only for Jake to mishandle Liam's trust in him and fail to follow through, kind of works as a metaphor for their friendship this season. Definitely not intentional, but still cool. This is the episode where the Dromies invade the music room. Upon entering, Liam says something about wanting to hear Jake's angelic voice, which I think is a bit ironic considering that it seems like they never ended up hearing it in the finale. Still, I do think it's a bit telling that Liam, even if jokingly, compliments Jake's interest in music, whereas Drew comes into the room already in a bad mood and calling the competition stupid, putting Jake on the defensive. When Jake says he's busy, Liam seems neutral, but Drew immediately becomes agitated at how Jake can't hang out as much anymore, and starts to question him. Before the conversation can really get anywhere, though, Henry and Liam end up touching the instruments, starting my Liam is left-handed theory. But, anyway, much to Liam's annoyance, Jake tells them to stop touching the instruments, and even though Jake was the one who made the request, Liam blames Haley and asks if this is really what Jake has to put up with all the time. And that wording really gets to me, because it makes it clear that even now, Liam still thinks that Haley is someone Jake has to put up with. He's still completely sure that Haley and Jake aren't actually friends, which is a notion it's pretty clear Drew is already at the very least heavily suspecting isn't actually true. He literally says so himself in episode 5. That's why he starts off this scene so angry and defensive and only cheers up after he sees Haley getting upset. Once Jake defends Haley again, Drew just starts straight up insulting her and calling her uptight, clearly trying to upset her as much as possible. And he then adds that he'd hate being around someone like Haley, with a very suspicious side eye that just makes it seem like he's trying to convince himself that Jake wouldn't like her company over his either. Which brings me to another interesting thing about Liam's previous line. While Drew is clearly trying to further upset Haley, Liam's line is fully aimed towards Jake, because Liam doesn't insult Haley in order to feel more secure in his and Jake's friendship. He insults her because he fully believes that Jake will agree with him. He has no doubts that Jake is only doing this for Daisy and doesn't actually like Haley, which is crazy considering he was there when Drew accused Jake of liking Haley. But Liam goes right back into fully buying into Jake still liking Daisy in every scene after that, so I guess he just decided Drew was wrong. I mean, Drew was clearly trying to convince himself he was wrong, so I guess that makes sense. Liam self-admittedly doesn't really get romance, so he'd probably believe Drew if he said he changed his mind. The fact that Jake still has a near heart attack every time Daisy talks to him also helps. Anyways, back to the scene at hand. Drew and Haley continue to argue, but we don't get to see most of Liam's reaction because his cut-out-of-frame curse strikes once again. He looks vaguely disappointed as the Dromies leave, but other than that, it seems like he has nothing to say. However, it is notable that in this scene, Jake promises to hang out with the Dromies after school, which leads us to our next episode. This episode technically starts with the freshman year flashback, but we already covered that, so instead we can skip to Jake meeting up with the Dromies for the promised hangout. This scene's actually pretty important because I know I've been saying Liam trusts Jake's word more than the others, but this is where that's actually proven. When Jake walks up to the Jomies for the hangout, Liam tells Henry that he knew he'd show up and that Henry owes him a soda, which means that either Jake has been missing hangouts so often that Henry legitimately believes Jake didn't mean it about hanging out after school, or that Henry has gotten to the point where he knows Jake doesn't actually prefer their company over the club's and believed Jake would break his word just based on that. Either way, it really says something that Henry, and later Drew, both admit that they truly believed Jake wouldn't show up. But Liam absolutely did, and he seems very excited about the fact that Jake showed, which makes me think that Henry was pretty stubborn about believing it wouldn't happen. And this one line of dialogue from Liam is fascinating, because it means we can now confirm that Liam is the only one from this point onward who still believes in Jake's word. Because, it's a pretty bad sign for your friendship if you go into every hangout believing that your friend is probably going to cancel to hang out with someone else, to the point that you are willing to bet on it or be actively surprised when they show up when they said they would. Liam is the only one who still thinks that Jake is a good enough friend to not ditch them with little to no warning. Hell, seeing as he's the only one not mad at Jake right now, I formed a crack theory that he's actually the one who convinced Drew to stop calling the music club freaks, because literally why else would Drew switch up like that right after arguing with Haley in the club room? There's always a chance Drew felt regret and engaged in self-reflection, but in that case, it really didn't last very long because it goes right back to demonizing Haley an hour later. But anyway, on with the episode. Jake has to leave for a minute, and Liam makes this face with a smile much more genuine than his usual one. And he makes this face when Jake comes back. Maybe it's just because he thought Henry's counting was annoying, but there is also a distinct possibility that it's just because he's happy Jake actually came back and is going to hang out with them, which is sweet, kinda. After Jake comes back, the Dromies go to Drew's house, and eventually Zoe gets bored and demands they do something besides sit there and watch Drew and Jake play video games, which is honestly fair. At this point, why did Drew even invite his girlfriend if he's just gonna ignore her and play video games the whole time? But after making up a new plan for what to do, Drew realizes Jake zoned out and asks him what's wrong. Jake asks if anyone knows if Daisy is seeing anyone, and, rare Liam W, because he tells Jake to just ask her. Not even to just ask her out, he tells Jake to just ask Daisy if she's seeing anyone. And yeah, if Jake would have just asked Daisy if her and Sean were a thing, this entire plot point would have been avoided. Unfortunately, Jake does not take Liam's advice and instead tells him he doesn't understand and that he saw Daisy and Sean together in the music room. And, increasingly more common, Liam W, because Liam's response is to ask if they were making out, which is played off as a joke, but he's right. He's asking if Jake actually saw them doing anything romantic, and even if Jake skirts around it, the answer is no. Jake's just being insecure because he doesn't want to accept that Daisy actually isn't a perfect angel and might have problems he doesn't know about. Because he and Daisy aren't friends and don't talk to each other when they're upset, as he's proving right now. The fact that everyone in universe considers Liam to be the least good at romance in this friend group gets more and more funny as the show goes on, because why is he actually the only sane one whenever romance gets brought up? But, unfortunately, once again, no one listens to Liam's weirdly good romance opinions, and Jake starts thinking Sean is actually trying to get with Daisy. And soon, everything snowballs, and all the Dromies give their thoughts on what they think Jake should do. And Liam's line is so funny, because nearly everyone else is trying to convince Jake that Haley is using him to make him sing with her in the competition, whereas Liam's only thoughts are that if Jake can't get with Daisy, he may as well call it quits. Because Liam doesn't need to convince himself or Jake that Haley is a manipulator and a bad friend. In Liam's head, Jake doesn't care about her and is only in the club for Daisy. And if Daisy already wants to date Sean, Jake may as well give up now on the competition. As Liam stated in the past, he thinks this was a bad idea anyway. Liam knows, or at least he thinks he knows, that Jake isn't in the club for Haley. Jake's only there for Daisy, as he reinforced to Liam just a minute before this. So Liam just says what he thinks makes rational sense from that point of view. Because yes, even with all this back and forth on Jake's end, Jake is Liam's friend. And that means that Liam trusts him. If Jake says he's doing this for Daisy, then he's doing it for Daisy. And there's no use in worrying about if he's doing it for other reasons. Liam believes him. And that's it for that scene. Really, the only other Jake and Liam moment this episode is when Jake smiles at Liam and Henry doing something stupid with their pens, which isn't too significant, but I thought I'd point it out since I've spent a lot of this video talking about how much Liam trusts Jake, but Jake clearly cares about him and Henry too, even if his worries mainly stem from Drew. This episode starts out with a Jake and Liam moment that can be kind of easy to miss. That being how Liam texts Jake about if he's going to be in class and offers him a candy he knows he likes, which is a far cry from Drew's latest text, which accuses Jake of ignoring them and definitely doesn't make Jake want to talk to him. Spoiler alert, Henry also later makes a comment about Jake avoiding their trio, and both times Liam doesn't seem to believe it. This time, instead of accusing Jake, Liam reaches out in a way that almost seems concerned, asking Jake if he's coming to school and offering him something he likes, possibly as a bribe to meet up with them. He doesn't seem angry or accusatory, and he simply wants to see his friend again. This is backed up later when Liam sees Jake actually coming to talk to them before school and makes this face. This is the face of someone absolutely ecstatic to see their friend. I'm serious, he looks happier here than he does during 90% of the series. Which makes it extra heartbreaking when Jake immediately accuses the three of them of sending the audio file and stabbing him in the back, which clearly freaks out Drew and Henry, and Drew says as much, but, Liam's face is not the kind of face you make when you're freaked out. It's the kind of face you make when you are getting increasingly frustrated that your friend is accusing you of something you didn't do. Which makes total sense given the sheer amount of times Liam has and will give Jake the benefit of the doubt. From my perspective, it seems like Liam truly believes you should always believe in your friends no matter what. And that's what's been keeping Jake in his good graces throughout the last few episodes. But now, Jake isn't following that rule at all. And Liam's pissed. Until Jake explains what actually happened and how he's kicked out of the club. After that, Liam seems to mostly forgive him and things go back to normal. Which is evidenced by that moment I mentioned earlier, where Henry asks when Jake will stop avoiding them. Liam argues that Jake's definitely not purposely avoiding them, just busy with all that club stuff, because even now, Liam still sees the best in Jake. Maybe that's why it hurts so much when he finally hears Jake admit that he actually does enjoy the club's company, that this wasn't just for Daisy, and that he'd been lying to them. And all those times Liam had defended him, and believed him, and put his faith in him, were all just times he was falling for Jake's deceit, hook, line, and sinker. Of course, he does laugh at a joke Jake makes not long after, so at first it doesn't seem like he's as upset at Jake as Drew. He doesn't seem to fully process things and all the implications of what Jake is saying until the Drake-up. We don't get all of Liam's expressions during the actual Drake-up scene because of the cut-out-of-frame curse, but the expressions we do get range from guarded to vaguely frustrated. And then, of course, there's his iconic line about how he appreciates Jake being honest, which, given all we've established about Liam being the only one who previously trusted Jake to be honest, takes on a bit of an ironic tone, doesn't it? One Tumblr user pointed out to me that this line can definitely come off as a backhanded compliment, since it's only because Jake lied to them for so long that him being honest now is an achievement. And of course the one who fell for his lies the hardest is going to be the one to call him out on that. Even though Liam doesn't seem as outwardly upset as Drew, I don't think it's unbelievable to say he wouldn't be able to forgive Jake right away for revealing he'd been lying to them for weeks, arguably years. Because to Liam, that revelation means everyone else was right, and he was just acting like an idiot this entire time. the only one who couldn't realize the truth that was right in front of him. And now that this whole believing in your friends no matter what thing has been proven to, unsurprisingly, not always work out, and can result in him getting hurt, I'm interested to see how he ends up treating Jake and even Drew in season 2. As for Jake, it's obvious he did truly care about Henry and Liam as well, since he addressed them in his apology, but I'm guessing things are going to be at the very least awkward between them, if not hostile, thanks to Drew. So yeah, that's Jake and Liam's entire relationship throughout season 1. I think it was actually kind of interesting, given you're inclined to read into Liam's dialogue as much as I do. It's clear that Liam, out of all of Jake's friends, has the most undying, unwavering faith in him, and that's what makes it so sad when his faith is proven misplaced, to the point it can come off a bit naive. And Jake, even though he doesn't really talk to Liam specifically all that much, clearly values him as a friend and doesn't want to lose him, even if he keeps lying to him anyways. Both of them clearly care about each other. The main thing I think gets in their way is just their differing views on friendship. Liam's had a very loyal best friend all throughout middle school and maybe even before that, so he believes he can always trust his friends and he expects them to always tell the truth. Jake, meanwhile, has never had a consistent close friendship like that, so he doesn't have that inclination to always trust his friends. In fact, because of how his peers have treated him in the past and how the Dromies treat people he thinks are like him, he's formed a deeply ingrained belief that none of his friends could ever truly understand him, and that there's a large chance they'll be upset and abandon him if he ever tells them the truth. And in the end, it's that disconnect that eventually destroys their friendship. By the time Jake learns from the club and his own mistakes that if people are really your friends, they'll accept every part of you, and that not communicating wasn't right, it's too late. Until season 2, that is. And yeah, I think these two's relationship is probably the one talked about the least between it, Drake, and Drenry, so I thought I'd shine a bit of a sympathetic light on it like I've seen those other friendships get in other videos. I hope I was able to convey at least a little bit of what I find interesting about their dynamic. Okay, I know I took suggestions in my last video, but in my defense, I recorded myself saying that before I was stuck in editing hell for months and realized I probably wouldn't be able to make another video unless I suddenly got super motivated. So, sorry about that. Maybe one day I'll actually get around to making videos that have nothing to do with Liam. I've been somewhat thinking about doing a video on Daisy since I've been interested in her lately, but we'll see what happens. I'm guessing once this video comes out, season 2 will either be about to come out or will already have come out, and maybe that will change my mind. So, thanks for watching. Have a good morning, evening, or night.